you can see what I mean by what I just got through saying in that at the very end of the last video right here. The problem is that Alex claims making this choice will require following a desire, but this choice could simply be free desire itself. It doesn't have to be the case that this desire was caused by another desire. So he's trying to have this thing where he's like, look, you're doing what you desire, so it still stands that you do everything that you want. But he doesn't like the fact that Alex was talking about how if there's an act that you do, it can be that it's always done in accordance to another one, and like somehow he's trying his best to separate those two. And the way he does it is by like introducing this concept of a highest desire and saying, well, look, we're not infinite, therefore this is at the top, and you're choosing something else, but it's not above that. It's not above that. It's not caused by another desire. It's something else. It's something over here, and that's like supposed to do all the heavy lifting for an argument, for him. So yeah, it doesn't hold up at all in the slightest. And by the way, I probably explained this in my last in my comments video, but he says the problem is Alex claims making this choice would require following a desire. So what he's saying is the problem is Alex says whenever you do an action, it is in accordance with a desire. First off, that is incorrectly said. You do agree with that, okay? Any choice that you would make would be a desire, okay? A desire. You got it right here when you said like another desire, okay? But no. A desire, you agree with that, period. The problem is Alex claims making this choice would require following another desire. So we can choose this. Did Alex say that if someone chooses to pursue suffering, that making this choice would require another desire other than suffering? Well, he doesn't say anything about suffering, but we don't have to be like, well, therefore he'd never say anything about it. Obviously, we can, use our freaking heads here. If Alex would have said anything similar to that, it would have been about the pleasure, right? So if you choose to pursue pleasure, that is your highest desire, by definition, according to, I'm just putting it in his words. And then, so he'd say the problem here is that Alex claims making this choice would require following another, okay, stop saying a, it's another desire. So think about that. Would Alex say that if someone chooses to pursue suffering, that would require another desire? Or no, I didn't mean to say suffering. If someone chooses to pursue pleasure, would Alex say that requires another desire? If they have the mindset in their head, not taking an action, right? The mindset in their head that I want to pursue pleasure. My highest desire is pleasure. It is pleasure. Seeking pleasure. Yes, heroin. If that is the way that they're acting and that they're thinking, can you not like see the problems already? So, if you couldn't see the problem with that, by the way, it is that, of course, Alex would not say that there's another hidden want behind just the mindset that, I want to. What is this mess? I need to get that off so I don't have to. There you go. If there is this mindset, I don't even remember what I was just freaking saying. Let me look at what I was freaking reading right quick. That red crap threw me off. But this could be, it doesn't have to be the, yeah. You're right. Pursuing, if we're talking about a person's base mindset that they want to pursue pleasure, it doesn't require another desire. It requires an understanding of evolutionary biology. He's saying actions that you take, that you think are done, that are not in accordance with a want, are in accordance with a want. That was the point of that section. Just to clear things up for you, since you are extremely confused. Okay, let me go ahead and start this video now. I think I'm going to play it until 6:15. So, no, he never concedes that in the entire video. Maybe he concedes it somewhere else. And like I'll get into later, it can definitely be the case that Alex does think this. I don't know if he does or not. Again, it can definitely be the case that he does. But he never says this. It's a straight up lie, unless he's getting it from another video. If he saw Alex say we maximize our pleasure in another video. It can be inferred from this video that Alex meant that humans, all that we do is maximize our own pleasure. And that would make sense. I'll get into this. But Alex never ever even uses the word pleasure in his video. Saying that humans... Okay, I was saying, so it can be inferred that he meant this, but if we make that inference, then Chaos has to agree with it as well. He has to. That all humans maximize their own pleasure. Because Chaos already said that he agrees that we only do things that we want to or are forced to do. So and I know this is how he inferred it actually, because when Alex brought up the thing about wanting to punch your mother, he was talking about, can you control and could you make yourself want to punch your mother? And then from that, Chaos kind of extrapolated this thing about, and get some enjoyment from doing it. He's so far removed from this debate, man. Like, I don't even know if this was probably the first time he's ever looked at it. So yeah, because of those two, in maximizing pleasure and then the enjoyment thing, or really just because of the enjoyment thing that goes along with it, I'm almost certain he's inferring that Alex's position is that we maximize our suffering because he thinks we always act according to our want. It's literally what he was saying. It's not about if we can get some enjoyment out of doing it, control our want to hit our mother. It's just about if we could actually carry that act out. Remember what we said? It's about if we can act differently. So let me play it. I'm going to play until 6:35. This is a common theme throughout his video, and then something I just laid out at the very beginning of this video that I'm making in his comment section. He loves asking questions and hoping that you either think that he is profound or think that I don't know what he's hoping, but he just asks the questions. He goes, like, Jesus. It's incredible. I've never met, or no, I won't say I've never seen anybody like this, but at least he gives us that, I think no, and I'll explain why in a second. But, okay, so he says, could it be the case that we are free to choose to maximize our own pleasure or to do the opposite and increase our suffering? If one chooses to suffer instead of seeking pleasure, have they invoked any higher wants? Well, what if they choose to... Because you are literally treating the suffer and pleasure thing in the argument as equals, but in the minds, what you're doing is you're hoping that in the minds of people, because you never use them actually interchangeably. Like, say, if someone chooses to seek pleasure instead of suffering, have they invoked any higher wants? Because you know how retarded it would sound. But so you always frame it like this, even though by the end of this and in the comment section, it ends up getting to the point where suffering and pleasure are just equally valid, highest desires that you could have. And then you change from one to the other and think, you can negate it and all this kind of crap like they're exactly the same. Why don't you ever do any of this bull crap where you actually, talk about someone that chooses to feel pleasure instead of choosing to feel suffering? Because you know that the choosing to suffer is already just totally unrealistic. But it would, obviously, if someone chose to feel pleasure, then it kind of like in the minds of the people, it's going to be like, well, is that totally free? Because obviously people don't want to suffer. And that's the thing. People do not want to suffer. So this is like, and again, some do, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But So first off, if doing only what you want is the same thing as maximizing your own pleasure, and this person wants to suffer, then choosing to suffer is maximizing their own pleasure. You really should not have said that Alex concedes this. I don't know what I meant by that. Hopefully you do, following along close enough. I think he has confused himself because suffering is quite literally the opposite of maximizing your pleasure. But you cannot say that doing what you want and maximizing pleasure are the same, yet for someone that wants to suffer, doing anything other than maximizing their own pleasure. Oh, no, doing so is anything other. For someone that wants to suffer, suffering is anything other than maximizing their own pleasure. You said they want to suffer. Suffering is their want. Want brings them some sort of pleasure. It might not be maximizing pleasure. And he actually, if you're going like, that's not true, steady dog. Well, you're about to freaking eat your own words, because he says something that is in line with exactly that. Okay, so he says, if someone chooses to suffer instead of seeking pleasure, this is what he just said. Have they invoked any higher wants? I think no, and I'll explain why in a second. And then he yaps about, like, how he thinks Alex says we do maximize our pleasure, but he thinks we don't. That kind of thing. So I'm going to play it at 7. This is what I was talking about earlier in my Google Doc, that he thought that it's, unimportant. This part is not unimportant. And so, whatever. So he says, keep this in mind. If someone chooses to suffer instead of seeking pleasure, have they invoked any higher wants? No. Okay, now listen to what he says. Okay, so one major problem and reason for his confusion arises from him not being specific enough in what he means by choose to suffer. And because of this, he uses it in 2 different ways. Well, I don't know if he specifically uses it 2 different ways. He's using it in an opposite way that creates 2 different versions of the word. So, and if he's equating these two, then he is creating a straw man. So let me define those 2. So the first one, which is the one he's using, is a perpetual emotional state, or you can say hatred or something like that, about an unchangeable or near unchangeable fact about yourself or yourself completely. It's some sort of it's a long-term basic mental state, choosing to suffer, because they loathe themselves, like that sort of crap. And then the second one is, which is what Alex uses, an immediate, in the moment, self-sacrificing act. And if you're shaking your freaking finger, wagging it at me, this can still apply to lifestyle changes. So like a change in a diet that is still, even though it's long term, you're well, I'm choosing to suffer long term because it's a diet. No, you're not. It's an immediate, it's totally different than suffering in the way he is using it. So in Alex's video, it certainly is an example of someone invoking a higher want. So when he's like, is this an example of someone invoking a higher want? I think no. And I'll explain why. Well, first off, you need to be a little more clear. You think that you're saying not all cases do they invoke a higher want. Alex's case certainly invokes a higher want when they choose to suffer. They're putting up with suffering now for a reward later. And the example Chaos pivoted to, it sounds like this person is choosing to adopt a perpetual mood or basic mental state. It makes a lot more sense that there wouldn't be any higher want for the latter. The discussion is about if we can control our actions, if we could have acted differently. So Alex's example explores the reasons behind an action. Chaos removes this layer entirely and just gets down to the person's mental state and basically just assumes people do things for no other reason than just to do them, which again would not be acting in accordance with their want. And even if it is, like he explained it is in the comment section, I addressed that too. He's having it. He's trying to have so many different versions of his argument, have them all at the same time. It don't work. But just in case, I'll give this some time, just in case chaos actually is talking about an action. Let's say choosing to suffer means like self-harming because they loathe themselves. If someone chooses to self-harm, they do it for an emotional release. You are spot on that sometimes people do things because of negative feelings they have about themselves. But those feelings are complex and in nearly every single case are seemingly impossible to get rid of. This might have been the worst example you could have given. These people are certainly not free. They do not control how they feel about themselves. This is ridiculous. In every single case, when someone chooses to suffer, it does not mean that they simply want to suffer. And by the way, we're looking at this through a realistic view. Keep in mind this whole time that it just doesn't make sense at all, even if this was realistic, because he is assuming that, people suffer just to suffer. Like maybe there are people that like their highest desire is suffering, but you are saying that like, oh, I think it could be the case that some people, it doesn't just necessarily have to be that we always do things because of another want. Okay, that's the claim, dude. That's the point of your video. Stop saying that and explain why you think it. So again, this behavior might arise from deeply ingrained psychological factors or emotional states such as trauma, guilt, or depression that influence the way they feel about themselves without deliberate or rational intent. If someone is deeply self-conscious or depressed, it may lead to harmful behaviors, but interpreting this as a conscious desire for suffering is just not realistic. I think that you have misconstrued the reality of our being here. People do not just choose to suffer because they want to suffer. This is ridiculous. The only examples other than a depressed person that come to mind are those that like to inflict pain on themselves. Like maybe they get some sort of sexual release from pain. But isn't the want behind people like this kind of self-explanatory? Maybe he means people that are red-pilled and think that they are God's strongest soldier, and they want to see as many adversaries in their life as they possibly can handle, and then some. But for these David Goggins clones, their reason for wanting to suffer is obvious as well. It isn't just to suffer. They want to be the best version of themselves that they could be, or they get some sort of spiritual satisfaction or fulfillment from it. For others who do not seem to suffer just to suffer, they choose to go through suffering to align with their morals, values, and goals. I hate these freaking headphones, dude. I'm actually about to cuss. I hate these stupid headphones. God. Okay. None of which are truly or completely in our control. But it seems like he isn't talking about discipline or any other form of short-term sacrifice right now anyway. Because I actually love my headphones. I love these things so much. But that feature is so annoying. I hate that. Like, it's not helpful, bro. They need to take that off for real. Or I just need to figure out how to disable it. That's probably what it actually is. Anyway, he's saying for some people they choose to do so, and this is in quotes, because they simply want to suffer. It sounds like he actually does realize that he is implying a distinction here between Alex's discipline group and this new group because of how he says some people that have no higher want. They just suffer just to suffer. Again, though, this is a perpetual emotional state. This is an incredible difference from what Alex is saying. Alex is speaking of something akin to discipline. He is speaking of a group of people that choose to suffer. And see, he's saying I need to figure out how, because I think I'm realizing what chaos is going to try and combat with right now. Let me just finish this. Of course, it means nothing. It's not going to mean anything. I'm going to address that, but I'm just saying. This wouldn't be a problem if you made it more clear that in some cases we do have a higher want, just not in all cases. And let me pause it and because something popped in my mind. I don't want to forget it because I do want to address this. I'd like to not give any opportunities for response, really. I go this entire paragraph to explain how there is a difference between his suffering and Alex's suffering. I don't need to read all of this, so let me figure out what I need to pick out. And honestly, I think he made it harder on himself when he made it about this, perpetual emotional state. He needed to stop doing that, and it really maybe isn't harder for himself because, look at the video, like, the reason he's doing it is because it is so, like, vague and hypothetical, and it's not easy to address. But it's totally different. This version of suffering is not even close to what Alex is talking about. And obviously, if you just conjure up a scenario where there's like, well, this guy, look, some people suffer just to suffer. He didn't even give an example of what this person would be like. He was like, well, it's simply because they loathe themselves. Did you explain how they can control the fact that they loathe themselves? Did you explain any of that? No, you didn't. Did you explain how they freely choose? Or did you just say, well, if we're free, then we're free? That's this entire video. If we're free, then we're free. Also note what he said at the beginning of the section. Their suffering for wishing to, or the reason for wishing to suffer may just be, and then ... I cut out some stuff so we can be more clear for clarity. So the reason for wishing to suffer may be because they loathe themselves. Their wishing to suffer might be because they loathe themselves. So they choose to suffer. Why? Because they hate themselves. So I'm like, again, you need to explain why they hate themselves. Obviously, yeah, there's a reason why, but explain how they can control that reason. And then also explain why he didn't say anything about another example. This is the same thing, okay? Don't slime your way back out of this one right here. You definitely are talking about the same thing here. And you say, and then after he goes, the reason for choosing to see themselves worthy of hate is to suffer. You see that? Do you see what I mean now about how he's like this suffer to suffer, just suffering to suffer? That's what he's saying. And he's using loathing yourself and suffering as synonymous. Like he's saying one relies on the other and then that one also relies on the other. They both cause each other. None of this makes sense. None of it. Do they choose to suffer because they hate themselves, or do they choose to see themselves worthy of hate because they wish to suffer? You must explain which it is, and you can't say it's both. Okay, it's not both. Regardless of if it is the same example or not, and regardless of if the scenario is realistic or not, chaos still has not fully engaged with the argument. Alex is focusing on if we can control our wants. So even if I accept that there sometimes is no higher want behind choosing to suffer, chaos still needs to explain how this person can control their want to suffer. Again, like I was saying earlier, he's fixating on this weird thing about just, Alex says that or he didn't even say there's a higher desire. He's inferring that there is a highest desire and saying that, because Alex thinks that there's always another want, because he said another. So it's like he agrees that we always do things that we want to. And in his comment section, he acknowledges that claim depends on saying that, what did he say? I want to go show it to you right now. That you can't control the objects of your desires depends that every time we change our mind, we do so at the influence of another desire. Which is where, this is the part he does not agree with. He's like, there's not always another desire. Look, there's a highest desire, and then you choose to negate it. Well, apparently you can't just disagree with that one part about it and still agree that everything we want to do, or everything that we do is that we want to do. You can't do that.